purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny.
Hello and welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm Catherine Fahringer, the producer of this show and the host for this particular program. I'm very excited today. I have a friend with me she is a volunteer for the ACLU. So I have had some experience now with her calling on people in behalf of church-state separation matters. And she's here with me today, Jane Tuck. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we are going to talk about voting in churches, which we think is a rotten idea, don't we?
Yes, but before we do that, Catherine,
go ahead.
Can I be presumptuous here and say that the first thing I want to do today is to compliment you on a great victory that I think you did, and that was the proclamation of Freethought Week from October 8th to 15th this year. And I think having the governor of Texas and the mayor of San Antonio sign proclamations making that Freethought Week official was a marvelous thing for you to have done.
You've given me goosebumps.
You are the Robert Ingersoll of San Antonio.
Oh, don't I wish, Roberta.
So, to go from that point.
Oh, you sweet, sweet thing. Well, it was pretty exciting, except that the local media, of course, paid no attention to it and took no interest in it. I think next year, and we're really working towards the year 2000, when we're going to Washington and have a big rally for reason, and that will be freethinkers from all over the country. And I found out something in this little exercise that I did not know. I thought possibly there were maybe 36 Freethought societies across the country, counting the ethical things. And I found out, much to my surprise, there are more than 450. That was very encouraging. But the problem is they're not knit. And so this was an effort to knit them up into a single focus, which would be October the 12th. So that's the way, that's what we're trying, but it certainly goes slowly. This is only the third year that it's been attempted. There have been a couple of other mayors before that did it, but this was the first time a state did it. And by the way, Missouri did it too.
I saw that.
Yes, isn't that grand?
Very good.
Now then, back to voting with Jesus.
Before we go further, yes, I love the ACLU and I am a member, but I'm not here as an official spokesman of the ACLU.
Oh yeah, I know.
No, I'm just here as a common citizen. And
concerned.
You know, the strength of the country is in the common citizenry if they will rise up and go to action.
Right.
So I do admire all the things the ACLU stands for. I think it's a tremendously important organization in this country. I think perhaps we would not even have a Bill of Rights today if it weren't for the actions of the ACLU.
Well, they're still working at chipping that thing away out from under us one of these days. If that terrible religious right thing, how can you call them a religious right when they're the religious wrong? Because they aren't religious really, do you think? They use it.
In this country, our First Amendment says, that the government cannot hinder the development of any religion. So I'm not going to speak against religions, I dare say. I'm just going to say that First Amendment is so important. It's been called the jewel in our crown of liberty by John Henry Falk, and I think he's absolutely right. And in admiration for the First Amendment, you have to go back and study history. And when you do, you realize what a great thinker, what a really profound person James Madison was.
Oh, yes.
I mean, he was the genius behind the First Amendment. And if the First Amendment is ever denied in this country, it's the end of our democracy.
I agree. It would be dead.
Now, the ACLU often gets ridiculed for some of the things it does. For instance, every Christmas there's always a lawsuit against the creches, the Christian creche in public places. And this week, the New Yorker magazine had a lovely little article about Molly Ivins.
Oh, I read it, yes.
And she, one time, when there was a suit brought against having the creche in the Capitol building, she said to Ann Richards, who was then the treasurer of the state of Texas, "Ann, what do you think about this lawsuit about the creche in the Capitol building?" And Ann Richards said, "Well, you know, I hope they don't take the creche out because it may be the only time we'll have 3 wise men in this Capitol building." And as far as voting in the churches, to some that may seem a very minor thing, something not to be concerned about. But, you know, it's these little nibbles of the First Amendment that weaken our country. And so I think anytime we see an abridgment of First Amendment rights, we really have to stand up.
Well, I agree. Now, it's too bad, in my opinion, that somebody didn't stand up when they were putting under God in the pledge. Mm-hmm. And in God we trust on the money.
True.
Somebody, I don't know where the ACLU was at that time, but I've never quite forgiven them because they obviously were on vacation. And the thing that, what people don't realize that we have to explain to them is with these symbols and these what do you call them, slogans or whatever, mottos, that's a better word, isn't it, when it's on money and stuff. You have these that refer to God. And immediately this is fodder for people to say, well, this is a Christian country. It says so on our money. Mm-hmm. It says so in our pledge. And that is one of the biggest problems we're having
exactly.
Right now.
And I think it goes back to education. And a good study of history reveals that the framers of the Constitution in no way ever wanted this to be considered a religious country per se. They wanted a very high wall separating church and state. And they worked very hard. And, you know, the First Amendment says it all. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, that to me is terribly clear. Congress shall make no law. It's just a little gem of writing. It says exactly what it means and how anybody could construe that to mean anything other than the fact that there shall be in this country a very strong separation of church and state. Well, I cannot fathom.
The problem with that is everybody says, oh, it doesn't mean that. It means this country should not establish one single religion as they do in England, where they have the Church of England. And that is, of course, not correct, but that's what they use that all the time. Now, in my opinion, any establishment is whenever the government sets forth to say that we're going to do it this way. We make some pronouncement about prayer week. They have proclamations for that's telling people how that's the government establishing a time for prayer, place for prayer, and really ordering the citizens to pray. And I think that is establishing a religion. I don't like that, and that's another dicey thing. And I wish they wouldn't fiddle around so much with that kind of thing. It's a sticky wicket, and it makes, again, it just reinforces this opinion that this is a Christian country, which, as you say, of course, was never founded on the Christian religion, however.
Back in history, you know, before we had the Constitution, many of the state constitutions did have a connection with religion. They also had in their state constitutions a lot of discriminatory remarks against Catholic, Jews, and atheists.
Yes, they did.
But from Maryland on south, back in the years about 1776, I think, the Anglican Church was the established church. And its clergy were the only ones in that area of the country who could perform marriages and do baptisms. And that went on for a matter of perhaps 3 years before the Anglican Church was disestablished. And at that point in time, the state of Virginia thought that the fair thing to do would be to support all religions through taxation, public taxation.
Goody.
And this is at the time when James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, who completely opposed that idea, rose and fought that off. And Madison wrote a treatise called Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments. And his writing was so firm and clear. And he said, you know, if you do this, then people who do not support that religion are going to be taxed to support those who do. And he made it very clear that this was not a good situation. And so the state of Virginia then did not pass the law, thanks to James Madison. So let's not forget James Madison.
I'll never forget him.
He's really
I love him
a
dearly,
star
and I
in this.
wish he was right here
And
now.
he wrote many, many things about the fact that we did not want, let me just read you something that he wrote about separation of church and state. He wrote that the purpose of the separation is to keep forever from these shores the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soil of Europe in blood for centuries. And we see that. And Molly Ivins in her column talks about it too. You look at Sarajevo, you look at Beirut, you look at Northern Ireland, how many, many places.
Look at Florida.
And look at back in history where religion has been the thing that has caused, you know, so much bloodshed. And so this country would be in terrible straits if we allowed the religious leaders to have sway. We don't want that, and we've got to work very hard to keep the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, as pure as it was meant to be.
Well, I think the problem that the religions have with that is the ones who are in a rise right now. They are the dominant ones. They think it's a great idea to have religion in government because they think it'll be their religion that's going to tell everybody what to do. So what we have to get out to the public is that when we say we want separation of church and state, it's for their benefit as well as ours. Myself being a non-believer, it's not an atheist against a religion. It is keeping all religions free to pursue their own religion without being bossed around by the government.
Absolutely.
But it's a hard thing to get them to understand that.
And the wise, strong religious leaders are those who agree with us. You know,
oh, absolutely.
The Baptist Church has always been strong. It always has wanted autonomy. It does not want to be a part of the government. And that's true of many, many wise religious leaders. They understand what our Constitution and Bill of Rights is all about. But true, we are faced now with people who are willing to cast aside our Bill of Rights, and it just means that we are in a struggle. And we've got to involve a great many people in the struggle, or things could get very, very bad.
Well, as you know, I belong to a number of organizations, and two of the ones that are really very religious. I mean, they're composed mostly of people with a religious affiliation, and are the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, which has a minister as its head, Barry Lynn, brilliant man. And then Americans for Religious Liberty, which is the executive director is Ed Dorr. Now, these are people that have among their members many, many religious people. So when I say I belong to those, people kind of get a gasp because they know I'm with also the Freedom From Religion Foundation. It means we want a government free from religion is what it is.
Exactly.
It's not such a terrifying title or name when you know what you're talking about,
That's
or
right.
what's being talked about.
That's right.
Well, let's go back to this specific of voting in churches, which in San Antonio is rather frightening, as you saw in the paper.
Yes, and my feeling is that I'm opposed to voting in the churches because it forces people into a place where they may not wish to be, where they may not feel very comfortable. And in addition to that, I would like our government here to tell us how much are they paying each of these churches out of our tax money to serve as a polling place. My feeling is that very few of these churches are doing this for free. I don't think they're doing it to help the country, to get the voters to come out.
No.
I think it may be very profitable for them. And if it is, that's information that we would like to know.
Well, and it's advertising too, let's face it.
Absolutely.
It's free advertising.
And then it's also, as we saw up in Austin, when they were voting on a proposition there, that the billboard of the church where people were going to vote had a slogan saying, I think I'm correct, that God would vote against this proposition. How does that influence people?
And yes, that was not very good. The minister who was supporting that particular bill, it was his church in which people were voting, and I think that's pretty awful.
Exactly.
You've got to...
And I think that in this country, certainly we have enough public buildings to accommodate the voters. Don't we have enough public schools to take care of our school children? Wouldn't there be sufficient schools if they were used as polling places, plus city halls and other government buildings where people could go to vote?
We even have some
Why are
malls.
we forced?
Yes. Why so many? And some of them handle 2 precincts. Mine, I believe, did. Mine. I didn't notice mine on here this time. But this is, I didn't count this time. The last time I counted, it was 26 churches.
Well, you know, we want to make polling places easily acceptable or accessible to the electorate so that they have no problem going and casting their votes. And yet when I worked in one of the polling places in a recent election, we had perhaps 18 people vote during the whole day. Now, it seems to me that perhaps we're setting up too many polling places, that some of them you know, could join together in several precincts voting there, rather than feel that we must use churches to make it easy for people to get to a place that they know. I really think your listeners may not agree that this is an important matter, but as I say, you know, each little bite out of the First Amendment weakens it. And I think this is a good fight, that there are other ways to set up the polling places rather than using churches.
Well, of course, I had vainly hoped that when we went down just to call on the elections administrator, and he was very cordial, and you made a very wonderful, I would like you to repeat every word. I wish I had had a tape recorder. You were so brilliant. I couldn't, I wrote FFRF, and I said, that's the most brilliant woman. It was wonderful. I had kind of thought that perhaps we'd have fewer this time, and I noticed no change whatsoever, which is very disappointing.
Well, I just think we must go back and call on him again and
I
use whatever strength we have.
When did we go down? Was it July?
I think so.
It was July. Well, since July, I have also contacted him a couple of times, the latest being I sent him a copy of my article, and I sent him, then later I sent him a copy of the Wisconsin resolution about the church voting that they have put out. I sent him that. I sent out their press release about the same thing. And it really is, you're being coerced to go to church, which is certainly un-American. I think that's rather dreadful. Well, can you just tell what you said, repeat what you said? You said, now, if we had a law about, you would find, you remember what you said?
Yes, I think I said that if litigation ensued that said that it was unconstitutional for people to be forced to vote in the churches as polling places, that I felt they certainly would be able to find other places to set up the voting booths. Is that what you mean? Yes,
but you went on and said, let's give that another go around. There already is a law, and it's in the Constitution.
Oh, okay. I have a very short memory.
And I thought that was the brilliant thing. I thought, well, there it is. It's already in there in black and white, and why on earth are we doing this? It's crazy. You said, now, if you really push to the wall, you'd have to find something else. And then you said, you should be pushed to the wall because it's in our Constitution. You just can't do this sort of thing.
Yeah. I'm a very strict constructionist when it comes to the Constitution. If they say there shall be no establishment of religion by our Congress, then that's exactly the way I read it.
By the voting administrator.
Right, yeah.
I wish they'd put that in. Well, I did talk to Father Wieselski. He's on the south side. I can't remember the name of the church. I'm not good at names, especially when they're long things like St. John of the Redeemer or the Mary of the Sorrow, the Perpetual Sorrow.
I know Father Wieselski
a
little
He's
bit
sweet
from many
man,
years
darling
ago.
Man. Love him, love him. He called me up one night. It was about something we laughed and chortled about. But he said that the south side has a real, southwest sides have a real problem in they just don't have all of the facilities that the north and the east, but gosh, looking at this, there's an awful lot of activity that's going on in the north and the east that doesn't prove that we have so many places. If that's what they're saying, we've got plenty of places, hey, let's use them. But still again, there's got to be something. He seemed to think they needed so much help with their voting. Well, they can give them help, but they don't have to have it in the church. I mean, if somebody comes to him and says, well, they can't have a language problem, the ballots are in 2 languages, what more do we want? So I don't know exactly why they need that much guidance unless the church is pushing them into something, which if they're saying, you vote for this, then that's wrong too.
Of course. Well, I just think that we have malls, we have all kinds of places of business that might be used. There just is not a dearth of buildings in this city that we have to turn to the churches, we have to break the wall of separation in that way.
If there were a dearth of buildings, then we would be a rural community instead of
exactly. We're
an
extremely
urban.
So by golly, and as I drive around the city, I can find a lot of wonderful places where voting booths can be set up.
We may have to
I'd be happy to work with the city to line these up.
We absolutely have to do that. There were a couple I wish I'd marked that were very strange places to vote. They were secular places, but I thought, well, isn't that sweet of these people? It wasn't a girdle factory or something like that, but it was kind of close. It was an unusual place, but you'd think there certainly could be more of those that volunteer for this, and I have a school right across the street from me. I just don't understand why I can't vote there instead of down a block away in a Catholic church.
I think all the schools should be used. Not only is it going to help us in our separation of church and state, but voting in the schools is a wonderful civics lesson for the children.
That's what I thought.
It's great for the children to see their parents and their neighbors coming out to vote as their civic duty. I mean, what better lesson can we give the school children from the elementary grades on through high school?
Absolutely.
And I say absolutely every school should be used as a voting place.
Well, I understand some of them just don't like it.
I'm sorry about that.
Me too.
But let's use them. Let's see that they are used.
I could not agree more. I would like to see that happen. But now what do you think our next step ought to be? Just start looking for places ourselves and saying, here, Mr. Dear Elections Administrator, is what we have come up with that might be suitable places?
That may be a very good way to do it. Or I don't know really who has the authority to make these decisions except for the gentleman perhaps whom we met. But he doesn't work alone. And so I think we need to know, is it the Commissioner's Court that we need to
Well, they did mention that,
but we need to find out how the setup works, who is in charge, who makes these decisions.
It's complicated in Texas because they said that in some elections it was the Democratic Party and the Republican Party chairman.
That's true. So that's probably the good place to start, is going to both of those chair people and giving up.
I got short shrift from the Democratic one. I got a real nice treatment from the Republican one. I already had approached them, and I knew it was a long way away because it won't be till next spring, I think. But I wanted to sort of lay the groundwork early.
I think we've got a vision, we've got a campaign, we have time to do it.
So they need to be alerted again.
And we certainly need to get started on it. This should be the last election that people are forced into churches to vote. We ought to make that our mission.
Oh, I should hope so. But we need some more help. Somebody else that I've written letters. I've done everything I can think of. Like I've written the ACLU in Austin. Yeah, and that got nothing. I said some of my objections. I just again, it's giving people the idea that then the church is a part of our democratic process. It is involved in it. Therefore, again, this is a Christian country. And notice we don't vote in temples. And
yes, I've often wondered about that.
We only vote in churches, and heavily, I might say, Catholic.
I don't know. I haven't really looked at the list to see
it's very
how
small
it's
print.
done. But I think it's a very sound and reasonable request that we're going to make from whoever we find to be in charge of drawing up these lists.
Yeah, if we can track them all down. Now, what was it he said also? The city was in charge of some of the elections. We have more elections in Texas than any other state in the union, I think. And I think they said the city was in charge of, I guess, when we have mayor and that kind of thing.
Right.
So that means tackling the city council members as well.
So the responsibility is divided into different areas, and we can pursue them all.
Yes, that's wonderful. What, you and me against the world is not
well,
as the song goes,
we
not
certainly
my
have
grammar,
to make a start. We'll make a start. And, I just think there are many, many people out there who feel the way that we do.
Well, let's find them.
We're not
okay. If anybody's out there that feels this way,
wilderness.
come and join us, because this simply has to be dealt with.
I'll tell you one good place to make a start.
Yes.
If what we have to do is educate people to what this country is about. Here was a wonderful man, John Henry Falk, who became a great student of the Constitution. And his own ability to earn a living in this country was destroyed by a group of people who did not understand what this country was about. They labeled him a communist. He was in no way a communist, but it was during those terrible years of the McCarthy era when there was a terrible witch hunt going on. And so John Henry Falk really made a determined study of the Constitution. And this is an excellent book, a biography written by a young journalist, Michael Burton. And I really recommend it so highly. I think anybody who reads this book has a wonderful perspective.
Maybe this camera can get a good look at it before we.
John Henry Falk is one of the heroes of people like Maury Maverick and Molly Ivins and Ann Richards. It's just anybody who reveres the Constitution and the Bill of Rights knows that John Henry fought the good fight.
He certainly did.
He's just a wonderful fellow.
The awful thing was he didn't exactly get rewarded for it because he never really achieved his prominence again.
That's true.
He was a lovely man, and I felt so privileged to have seen Pear
Orchard.
Yes,
it was
that
beautifully
was marvelous.
done.
And I shook his hand and thanked him, and that was when he was dying of cancer. And
yes.
It was really very sad. We've lost a great American and a great humorist.
That's right. And that's why I think it's important, especially here in Texas, his home state, that everybody should know him, know what his experiences were, and then listen to his words as he talks about how important the First Amendment is.
And Jane, we've had it for now, and it's goodbye from Freethought Forum. Buy the book. It's good. I guarantee you.
Thank you, Catherine.
My
Thanks, Jane.
conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. And should tyrants take me and throw me